anniversary. They had been talking about the weekend for months. Not with big announcements. Just the quiet kind of planning that settles between people who already know the answer will be yes. 4 years of marriage. The same shared celebration they had kept since the double wedding. This year the cabin sat farther from the city, larger, quieter, surrounded by pine that seemed to swallow sound. When the gravel road finally opened onto the clearing, Jennifer was the first out of the car. She stood with her hands on her hips, looking up at the timber and glass. "I already don't want to go home," she said. Erica laughed as she pulled her suitcase free. "4 years. Still feels like we just left campus." Mike stretched, rolling his shoulders. "Speak for yourself. I've been planning my escape for at least 2 of those years." David walked past him and flicked the back of his head the way he had done since first year. "You wouldn't last a week without us." Inside, the place opened around them. High ceilings. A stone fireplace already laid with wood. Windows that looked straight into the trees. They moved through the rooms together, pointing things out, claiming corners, falling into the easy rhythm that had always existed between the 4 of them. That first evening the fire was lit. They sat close on the large sofa, plates balanced on their knees, wine glasses catching the light. The talk drifted the way it always did when no one was performing. Jennifer leaned into Mike. "You remember the night you proposed? You almost dropped the ring." "I did not." "You did." David had to pick it up with his shoe. David raised his glass. "Still have the scuff mark somewhere." Erica looked at him across the firelight. "4 years. What are we even doing with the next 4? No one rushed to answer. The silence that followed was comfortable. Later, doors closed along the hallway. In one room Erica stepped out of the bathroom in a soft green slip and found David already waiting. They didn't need many words. In the other room Jennifer and Mike were louder at first, then quieter. Both couples fell asleep the way people do when they still trust the life they have built. The next morning was slow. They made breakfast together. David at the stove, Mike cutting fruit, the women setting the table and stealing pieces before anything was ready. Afterward they drove into the small town nearby for supplies. They walked the short main street in pairs, stopping at a bakery, a small outdoor shop, a place that sold local honey. Jennifer and Erica tried on hats they had no intention of buying. Mike and David stood outside with coffee, talking about nothing important, the kind of easy conversation that required no effort. Back at the cabin they hiked a short trail behind the property. The path was soft with pine needles. They walked in a loose group, sometimes 2 and 2, sometimes all 4. At one point Jennifer stopped and pointed at a clearing. "We should bring the kids here one day," she said, almost without thinking. Erica smiled. "Listen to you, already planning for children." "I'm just saying, it's beautiful." Mike reached for her hand and squeezed it. David watched them for a second, then looked away toward the trees. That night they cooked together again. The conversation stayed light. Old university stories, the time Mike got locked out of residence in his underwear, the night Erica and Jennifer decided they were going to be friends for life. Laughter filled the kitchen. No one was performing. It simply felt true. On the 3rd morning the women decided to drive back into town for a longer look around and a late lunch. "You 2 stay out of trouble," Jennifer said, pointing at both men before she closed the car door. The cabin settled into a different quiet once the sound of the engine faded. They trained outside the way they always had, competitive, laughing, pushing each other. When they came back in, shirts damp with sweat, they headed for separate showers. David finished first. He sat on the edge of the bed, still cooling down, and pulled on the tight yellow briefs that sat low on his hips. Mike walked in a few minutes later, hair wet, water still running down his chest, towel around his waist. He stopped when he saw David and let out a short laugh. David looked up. "What's funny?" Mike pointed with his chin. "A grown-ass man wearing boxer briefs like that. Bro, I think I was in primary the last time I stopped wearing those. They look like they're not even your size." David glanced down at himself, already smiling. "So you're making fun of me now?" "I'm not making fun of you. I just wasn't expecting that from you." What weren't you expecting? I don't know. Something normal. Regular boxers. But that. Mike shook his head, still grinning. That says a lot about you, bro. David chuckled. Leave it alone. Mike dropped his towel, pulled on his own underwear, and stayed in the room. They kept talking old gym stories, a trainer they both used to hate, the time David showed up to a first date in the wrong shoes. The conversation stayed light. Then Mike reached for his bag and knocked something off the nightstand. A small bottle hit the floor and rolled. He bent down, picked it up, and looked at it. Lube. The word sat in the air longer than it should have. David didn't answer right away. Mike set the bottle back slowly. The teasing was gone. David spoke quieter than before. You've been looking at me differently these past couple of days. Mike tried to keep it light. What do you mean, bro? David took a step closer. You know what I'm talking about. Mike's voice dropped. Bro. Don't pretend you haven't. I've seen you. They stood very close. For a second it felt like one of them might close the last bit of space. Then Mike stepped back. We can't do this. We're married. You're married to Erica. I'm married to Jennifer. David took another step. Are you sure? Mike's back met the wall. Listen, we can't. David's hand came up and rested against the side of Mike's neck. For a moment neither of them moved. Then their lips met. At first Mike didn't pull away. The kiss lasted only a few seconds before he turned his head. This isn't okay. David didn't push. He only asked quieter, Are you really sure? Mike didn't answer. David kissed him again. This time Mike's hands came up on their own. The resistance broke. Skin met skin. They kissed deeper, the moment taking over completely. David lifted him and carried him the short distance to the bed. What followed was careful at first, almost hesitant, then deeper, more certain. Mike's hands moved from the sheets to David's back. The sounds between them stayed low, private. When it ended they lay side by side, still breathing unevenly, staring at the ceiling. David turned his head. Are you feeling okay? Mike exhaled. Yeah, I'm just processing what just happened. David's voice was quiet. What just happened? Don't think about it. Just relax. They stayed like that for a couple of minutes. Then the sound of a car horn cut through the cabin. Shit, they're back. They moved quickly. By the time the front door opened they were on the couch watching a match like nothing had happened. Jennifer walked in first, smiling. Miss us? Mike looked up and gave her the smile he had practiced for years. Always. That evening the four of them sat around the table. The food was good. The wine was open. The conversation turned, almost naturally, toward the future. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Babe, we've been married almost half a decade. I've been thinking a lot about us having a family. I can't wait to be a mom and hear little feet running around the house. What do you think? Mike smiled the way a good husband should. That sounds beautiful. I want that too. I want to build a family with you. Erica's eyes lit up. I feel the same. I want our kids to grow up together, just like we all did. David nodded. The four of us raising children who are practically cousins. Feels right. Jennifer laughed softly. We've come so far. It's crazy to think we're already talking about the next chapter. Mike reached for her hand. And we're doing it together. That's what matters. Across the table David and Mike's eyes met for a brief second. Neither of them looked away fast enough. The wives kept talking. Excited. Planning a future the two men had already started to break. Later that night both couples went to their rooms. The wives had prepared something nice, soft lighting, clean sheets, the kind of quiet effort that said they wanted their husbands close. In both rooms the men were attentive, patient, present. They made love to their wives with real care. When it was over the women fell asleep easily, warm and satisfied. Erica slept on David's chest, her breathing slow and even. David stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the earlier moment over and over. After a long time he carefully shifted her onto the pillow so she wouldn't wake. He reached for his phone. David, come outside. Mike, why? David, just come. Mike slipped out and found him on the back deck. The night was quiet. Mike kept his voice low. "Why did you call me outside, David?" David didn't answer with words. He stepped forward, grabbed Mike by the front of his shirt, and kissed him hard, right there in front of the cabin. They broke apart, both breathing heavily. Mike looked back toward the house. "David, what is wrong with you? We're going to get caught." David's voice was rough. "I can't stop thinking about what happened earlier. I can't stop thinking about you. What happened happened, but we're going to get caught. What's wrong with you?" David kissed him again, slower this time. Mike didn't resist. After a moment, Mike took his hand. "Follow me." They moved farther into the trees, away from the cabin lights. This time it was quick and urgent, almost desperate. Mike held onto a low branch, bending forward while David stood behind him. Everything happened fast. When it was over, they fixed their clothes in silence, walked back to the deck, and stood there for a few minutes. David lit a cigarette neither of them really wanted. They didn't talk. After a while, they went back inside as if they had only stepped out for air. The next morning, everything looked normal. Breakfast, coffee, easy conversation. No one mentioned the night before. 2 days later, the four of them drove to a private game reserve. The women were taken for long spa treatments. The men were given horses. They rode side by side through open grassland. Soft morning light. The only sounds were the creak of leather and the soft thud of hooves. David glanced at the hills. "I like nature. It's peaceful here." Mike nodded. "Quiet. Refreshing." They rode in silence for a while. Then David spoke again. "I don't regret what happened the other night." Mike kept his eyes on the path. "Yeah, David. I've been waiting for years for this moment." Mike finally looked over. "You were kinda intense that day." David gave a small laugh. "Sorry." "Don't be. I felt it too." They rode a little farther. Then Mike's voice changed. "As much as this happened, it has to stay between us. We're married. I don't think we should continue." David looked at him. "It's not like you don't want this. I want you, and you want me. You know that." Mike shook his head. "What happened in the past stays in the past. In college we were more than friends," David said. "You know that. We both ran because we were scared. I'm done running." They reached a quiet clearing and stopped the horses. David stepped closer. "I don't care anymore. I want you, and I love you, Mike. I don't want this to end." They kissed, slow at first, then deeper. They undressed each other gradually. They ended up on the ground, David on top of Mike. This time the pace was different, slower, more deliberate, almost careful. Mike's hands moved up David's back, pulling him closer. The sounds between them stayed low and private. When it ended, they stayed there for a couple of minutes, clothes scattered on the ground, not speaking. Then they dressed quickly and rode back. That evening the four of them went to a small bar near the reserve. They drank and laughed and talked about nothing important. Later, back at the cabin, the husbands made love to their wives with real tenderness, the kind that comes from guilt as much as from love. The women fell asleep, believing everything was still solid. The men lay awake longer than they admitted. Back in the city, the distance began quietly. The first week felt almost normal. David still kissed Erica when he came home. Mike still asked Jennifer about her day. But small things started to shift. David began staying later at the office. When he walked through the door one night, Erica was still on the couch with a book open on her lap. "You're late again," she said, not accusing, just noticing. "Meeting ran over. Traffic was bad." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, the same way he always had. She smiled, but her eyes stayed on him a second longer than usual. In the other house, Mike came home with takeaway and a tired smile. Jennifer met him at the door. "You okay? You look drained." "Just a long day." He pulled her into a hug that lasted a little too long, as if he was trying to convince both of them that everything was fine. They started meeting in the middle of the week. The first time was at a quiet coffee shop far from both their neighborhoods. They sat across from each other with untouched cups. Mike spoke first. "We should stop." David looked at him. I know. Then why are we here? David didn't answer right away. He turned the cup in his hands. Because I can't stop thinking about you. And I know you feel the same. Mike leaned back. This is going to destroy everything. It already is. They left separately. 2 days later they met again, this time in a hotel room booked under a false name. They barely spoke. The sex was different again. Quieter, almost angry, as if they were punishing themselves and each other at the same time. Afterward they lay side by side without touching. We can't keep doing this, Mike said to the ceiling. David turned his head. Then tell me to leave and I will. Mike said nothing. At home the cracks widened slowly. Erica started asking softer questions. You've been distracted lately. Is everything okay at work? David would smile and say yes, then change the subject or pull her close and kiss her until the question faded. He bought her flowers twice in 1 week. He planned a dinner reservation and then canceled it at the last minute because something came up. Each kind gesture felt heavier than the last. Jennifer noticed Mike checking his phone more often, always turning the screen away. One evening, she found him standing in the kitchen long after he had said he was coming to bed. What's going on with you? She asked quietly. He turned, forced a smile, and walked over to her. Nothing, just work stuff. Come here. He held her, kissed the top of her head, and guided her back to the bedroom. She let herself believe him for another few days. The two women began talking more often. At first it was casual. Has David been weird with you too? Then more pointed. They compared the late nights, the sudden work emergencies, the way both men seemed present and absent at the same time. Suspicion settled in like a slow fog. They found the hotel charges under names that didn't belong to either of them. They started following the cars. One evening David and Mike met at a quiet bar across the city. Soft music. 2 glasses of whiskey. Already a little tipsy. Mike stared at his glass. This is getting dangerous. David didn't look away. I know. We keep saying we'll stop. And we don't. Mike let out a short, tired laugh. You remember how it started? First year of college. We were inseparable. People used to joke that we were already married. David smiled faintly. I remember the night everything almost happened. We were both too scared to say it out loud. Mike nodded. Then you started dating that girl from the debate team. I started dating Jennifer's friend. We pretended it was normal. We weren't fine, David said. We just got good at lying to ourselves. Mike looked up. And now we're still lying. Only this time the stakes are higher. David leaned forward. I'm tired of lying. I want you. I've always wanted you. I used to picture a different life. One where we didn't run from each other. Mike's voice dropped. David. I'm serious. I already told Erica I want a divorce. Mike stared at him. What? I can't keep doing this halfway. Either we stop completely, or we stop hiding. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Mike reached across the table and covered David's hand with his own. The night the wives followed them, the hotel lobby was quiet. David walked in first, tall and composed, asking for room 24. Minutes later Mike followed. Erica and Jennifer looked at each other and finally understood. Outside the room they listened. The sounds were not conversation. It was the sounds of two people really having a moment. Inside it was David and Mike. Mike was on top of David, with a white blanket covering just enough to show his back and the curve of his hips as he moved. David lay beneath him, hands gripping Mike's back. They didn't notice the door. The sounds continued low, unbroken. As Mike pushed deeper, David's voice came out rough and broken. Yes, Daddy, yes. Erica's voice cut through the room. What the hell is going on in here? Both men froze. David's eyes flew open. Mike turned his head. For a long second no one moved. The only sound left was their heavy breathing. The two wives stood in the doorway, faces pale, staring at the exact moment everything they had feared became real. There was no more lying after that night. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way that only real endings are quiet. Conversations happened in living rooms and kitchens and finally in lawyers' offices. David and Mike left the houses, the cars, the shared accounts. They walked away with almost nothing except the knowledge of what they had broken. Then the last piece arrived. Both women were pregnant. Both tried, in different ways, to use the pregnancies as a reason to stay and repair what had been damaged. David sat across from Erica in a cafe the day she showed him the ultrasound. Her hands were shaking. "You can't leave now. This is your child." He looked at the image for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was steady and tired. "I'll be in this child's life if you want me to be. I'll show up for everything. But I can't be your husband anymore. I spent years pretending I was someone else so everyone else could be comfortable. I won't do it again. Not even for this." Jennifer's conversation with Mike ended the same way. 6 months later, the two men lived in a small rented apartment on the 3rd floor of an ordinary building. The walls were thin. The furniture was sparse. A second-hand couch. A bed that still smelled faintly of new plastic. A single window that looked out onto another brick wall and a narrow strip of sky. Evening light moved slowly across the floor. Outside, a car passed. Someone laughed on the street below. The city kept moving the way it always had. Mike stood at the window with his arms folded. David came up behind him and rested a hand on the back of his neck, thumb moving once in a small, absent circle. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Mike turned his head slightly, enough that David's hand stayed where it was. "You okay?" he asked. David's answer came after a pause. "I will be." They stayed like that a while longer. Two men who had paid everything they once thought they needed, standing in a room that was finally theirs, watching the light change on the wall across the street. The cost had been everything. They paid it anyway.